So number two, feminist. So I touched on this in the previous Daddy Issues Red Flag. Many Western women today either identify as a feminist or have welcomed the toxic feminist belief into their schools of thought. They are indoctrinated to believe that men are privileged, that men hold women back, and that men succumb to the patriarchy. It's interesting. We did a ladies' night show Monday night, Moff and I. We had a panel on. There was a gal on that was talking about wanting to get married, and just, you know, you could tell she was the typical indoctrinated by the feminist lingo, the narrative, the sound bites, and all that sort of stuff, because it came out that she thought that she lived in a man's world, and that the patriarchy was definitely a thing out there. One of the chapters I talk about in the book, The Unplugged Alpha, is the female first primary social order. And the world that we live in today, it really isn't a patriarchy. It's more of a matriarchy, if we're being honest. And I break down the reasons for that in the chapter. Let me keep going on here. So thankfully, a devout lifetime feminists are usually easy to spot. So here's a couple of the telltale signs. They avoid traditional feminine cues, instead opt for shorter, unnaturally dyed hair colors, bright blue, purple, pink, red, that sort of stuff. They mutilate their body with tattoos and facial piercings often. They're often overweight and usually dress in ill-fitted clothes. Now, that's not always true. I'll get to that in a second. Versus keeping themselves fit, well-dressed, and groomed to maintain their feminine physical appearance to men. Feminism preaches radically leftist political views that fight for unlimited free abortion, elevate single mothers on a pedestal, and claim that masculinity is toxic. Okay, not a version of it or calling it toxic masculinity. Basically, all masculinity is toxic is what they're essentially saying. Feminists hate it when the state imposes limits on abortion and tries to force them to be mothers. However, they are more than happy to use the family law system to enforce men to be fathers, right? So they don't want to be a mother. Let's go and take care of that. We'll terminate that. But if they end up becoming a mother, then they'll use the state to force a man to pay up, right? So that's why, you guys need to understand, it's like once your seed leaves your body, you've lost all control. It's all the decision-making power is in her hands. Right? Some guys will try to influence that, but at the end of the day, the decision-making power is in her hands and her hands only. So you have to understand that. Feminism teaches women to vote for the welfare state, so large handouts, free shit, social programs, free health care, vaccination, abortion care, whatever you want to call it, right? Massive government handouts, huge tax rates on top income earners because, people with money are evil, so we have to tax the shit out of them. And social programs that widely benefit a female primary social order. There was a guy that I had on moons ago, and he was pulling up some data about the age and the genders of those that contribute to the tax system or are general net contributors to the system in general. Men are basically tax cattle. We contribute into the system basically as soon as we enter into the workforce in our early 20s. And we continue to do so basically until we die. So there's always a net contribution to the state's tax welfare system redistribution of wealth. The interesting thing that came up is that women are only a net contributor after about the age of 40, 45, like close to around the age of menopause. Prior to that, it's a net receiver. Right? I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. That's just a statement of fact and a reality of what it is. So you just have to understand that that's a balance of how things move in the world, right? A feminist will never appreciate you or value you as a man. Feminism teaches women to be victims, and anyone with a victim mindset cannot find happiness. Today's version of feminism is so toxic it is anti-femininity. It encourages women to hate men while simultaneously encouraging them to behave like men, and that they should ditch the notion of motherhood and prioritize careers. Feminism doesn't seek to make women better or more feminine. It seeks to make women terrible versions of men, right? This is why, when you talk to these older girls on the Ladies Night podcast and they get into their close to their epiphany years or post, so let's say 28, 29, upwards to about 40, and you say something to them like, okay, you want a top shelf man, so what is it that so what about you makes you attractive to men? And the answer is always the same, right? They'll be like, well, I've got a good job. I've got a Tesla. I've got a house. I've decorated my house. It's tidy. I have my degrees. They're framed on the wall in mahogany. There's little letters after my name that show that I'm important. I've got my savings, you know, all that sort of stuff. And what they're basically describing is a man. They're basically describing what makes a man attractive to a woman, right? So when we talk about feminism seeking to make women into terrible versions of men, it doesn't talk to women about, you know, be useful in his life, be agreeable, don't be disrespectful, you know, pleasantries like that, right? Like guys kind of want peace in their life. They don't want chaos, or they don't want to deal with a competitive woman. One of the other red flags, which we'll talk about in a second. But you get the idea, right? Ownership is a concept that most women struggle with. However, feminists are often completely unfamiliar with it. And so everything will be the fault of the patriarchy. There's a famous clip out there with Jack Nicholson. I can't remember who the female actor is. I think the movie is as good as it gets. Somebody can correct me in the comments. But basically, she chases him down to the elevator, and she goes, wait, I want to ask you a question. How do you write women so well? And he stops, and he turns around with a frustrated look on his face, with a Jack Nicholson smile, and he goes, I think of a man, and I take away logic, reason, and accountability, right? And then he just basically writes, and he turns around, and he keeps walking, and she has that look of, you know, despair on her face. So it's kind of an iconic moment. Therefore, any woman that identifies as a feminist, therefore avoid any woman that identifies as a feminist at all costs. Since the hashtag #MeToo movement, we've seen several exceptional men fall to the false claims of sexual harassment or rape, with the vast majority of these false charges originating from feminist women. Sadly, even feminine cues are not enough anymore. There are plenty of women out there that identify with feminist values that remain feminine in appearance, and these are the ones that you must be the most careful with, as they are on a transformational path to obesity, collecting cats, eventually short, brightly colored hair. If you're getting into a long-term relationship or even considering marriage, it is vital that you give yourself a good couple years to watch both her behavior and her choices in life. Pay close attention to her before you do something silly like marrying a woman that appears feminine but internally believes in feminist propaganda. This is really important, guys. I've arrived at the notion, I've had to surrender to this, that it's not a question of if you can find a woman that has not got any feminist sort of toxic feminist values sort of thing. I think that to a degree, all women at this point have had their mind polluted with this virus. Okay. It's just to what extent now? It's just, you know, to what extent? Because I've talked to a lot of dudes now on private consults in my coaching practice where they book me privately and we're on for like, it can be hours or even like multiple sessions in some cases where they're dealing with some difficult shit, either in a divorce, vetting a chick, they're contemplating taking them back. And one of the things that often comes up is they're like, I don't understand what happened. You know, she came from a conservative family and a state that was conservative. Her parents are together. You know, they were gun owners. I went to church all the time. You know, Christ pill, Jesus pill, all that sort of stuff. And then here we are, like, you know, 12, 13 years later. And, you know, she works in HR at some big multinational company, and she's put on some weight and cut her hair short and dyed it purple. And she's divorcing me and taking everything and the kids, and she's behaving incredibly badly. The thing you have to understand is that a woman always reserves the right to change her mind at any given time. So the woman that you marry is never going to be the same woman that you divorce. There's always going to be a change. There's going to be some kind of an evolution. So there's no real guarantee that even if you select a woman that is conservative in nature, with a good family, with good family values, subscribes to an organized religion that's good. I mean, I've had these conversations with these Christ pillars before. I did a podcast with Chase Sovereignbra on the Unplugged Alpha several weeks ago. You guys can go back to the episode if you want to see it, where they're talking about the Christ pill. But it's like the churches themselves are censoring and rewriting the language in Scripture. Like in the past where it said, you commit, you get married, a woman has to obey her husband. They're basically saying, commit and get married, but they don't talk about the obey your husband part. Like they're basically crossing that line out. So they're finding ways, even in the churches today, which mostly are beta factories, if we're being honest, to censor out certain things that, are hurting the fifis of, the gals out there because of toxic feminism. So it's incredibly difficult, guys, to find a gal that isn't going to have any of these traits of toxic feminism, or subscribes to the notion of feminism being a reality that they believe in. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full-length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here, and pinned down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.